Hello, ladies and gentlemen, Gabester here. This is the quick guide for Heroic Council of Elders, and as usual, if you're looking for more detail, click on the annotation to see the full guide. So, let's get started. So your raid composition, you'll want 2 tanks and 2 or 3 healers. I would strongly recommend 3 healers, especially these days after 5.3, because DPS should be plenty high enough, and there can be a lot of damage on the raid during this. It's also worth noting that your ratio between ranged players and healers and your melee is important and will determine somewhat how you handle Frostbite, which we'll talk about in a moment. So the first addition on Heroic is Soul Fragment in the Shadowed Soul ability. This is cast by Kazra'jin every other time that empowerment is swapped. So basically every other transition from one empowered council member to the next, Shadowed Soul will be cast. And this applies a Soul Fragment to a random raid member that does not currently have it applied to them. It does shadow damage, pretty mild damage, but there's a stacking debuff. And this stacking Shadowed Soul debuff increases damage taken by 3% for the remainder of the fight. So to handle this, the basic goal here is to have it apply to whoever it goes on originally, and then when that player gets to 10 stacks or so, have them apply it using their extra action button to a new player that does not have a stack. Ideally someone that can afford to take extra damage. So our general method was to apply it to melee players first, and then to a tank that doesn't have a tank target anymore, and then to ranged or healers after that. So come up with a basic pattern that you can pass it around, because as the fight progresses, the stack count will be higher and higher. Eventually when all 10 players have 10 stacks or more, then you'll want to allow it to get up to 20 on select individuals. Again, prefer players that can soak the damage. So I don't have time to talk about the full strategy or how Frostbite works on Heroic. So again, if you want the full details, check out the full guide, and there's links in the description of that video for the Frostbite section. So essentially the way we handle Frostbite is the player that's afflicted by Frostbite comes into melee range, where we have 3 groups already set up in a triangle formation, and each of these groups holds 2 melee players. That way when the Frostbite player is standing with any one of these groups, they're within range of 2 other players at all times. Then the Frostbite player simply rotates between the 3 group locations about every 6 to 7 seconds. This rotation is necessary on Heroic because of the body heat effect, which essentially limits the amount of time that a Frostbite player can have their damage reduction reduced to about 8 seconds out of every 16. So the point is that Frostbite player will rotate between 3 groups of 2 players every 6 to 7 seconds and just keep going around for the full duration. And this will ensure that the damage of Frostbite is reduced as much as possible. If you don't have enough melee players, however, and you use ranged players as part of these groups, keep in mind that those players will be potential sand trap targets from Sewell. So it's important that once the Frostbite is complete, that ranged players stay out of melee range until the next Frostbite is about to be cast. And it's always cast at about 10 energy right at the start of the fight, and then again around 80 energy on Frost King. If you can't do a 3 group of 2 method for Frostbite, then the best thing is just to try to heal through it with cooldowns. Keep the Frostbite player away from everyone and heal through the damage. If you can't heal it, you can just let the player die and res them. You'll only get 2 casts of Frostbite for the first round, and that's when things are really difficult. The last thing you can do is immunity the Frostbite. So when it's applied to a ranged member, you'll get a little arrow above your head that indicates it's being applied to you. As soon as that arrow hits, you can use immunity effect like Ice Block or Bubble, and it will just eliminate the Frostbite from ever applying to you. You're basically immune to the application. However, you have to be very quick to do that. So when Frostbite is about to come out, watch for that arrow above your head, and if you have an immunity, hit it immediately, and you should completely eliminate that Frostbite application. The new ability on Heroic for Marley is Twisted Fate. So here you can see she's casting it while she's empowered. And all you need to do is make sure that your ranged players are at maximum range when this is about to be cast, and that Marley is within melee range of the rest of the raid. This will spawn a Twisted Fate add, one from your melee and one from a random ranged. And the closer that these adds get to one another, the more damage they deal to the raid. So that's why max range is important. Once they spawn, they can be stunned and knocked back and all that, and they should be killed around the same time frame if possible. So make sure your ranged and your melee have the damage roughly split among them. So here you can see new Twisteds are spawning. So our melee are killing the melee one, and our ranged are killing the ranged one. And that's all there is to it. Just keep them stunned, knock them back to keep them far away, and then heal through the damage that they deal. And these will usually spawn twice per phase. Kazra'jin's new ability on Heroic is Discharge. So while he's empowered, he basically works like he does on normal, where he reflects damage, but in this case he reflects damage to the entire raid. So you'll basically take a lot more damage while Kazra'jin is empowered. There you can see he's stunned and he's hitting everyone. So this is where you're going to want to use your raid cooldowns, your survival cooldowns, healing cooldowns, all that stuff. So just come up with a rotation that your raid can do. So the first discharge, you might use, Tranquility and Aura Mastery or something like that. Next one you could use Revival, and another Aura Mastery is kind of what we do, or Rally Cry, whatever it is. But just make sure that players have a rotation for each discharge so that they can cool down the damage, because otherwise it's going to be very hard to deal with. And this is where 3 healers is really helpful. So the final heroic ability is from Sewell while he's empowered, called Treacherous Ground. And I don't really have any footage of this, but the basic idea is that the sand traps that spawn, if they're close enough together, they will combine into a larger sand trap. And then when Sewell is empowered and he uses Sandstorm, the adds that spawn from the larger sand traps will be stronger as well. However, your basic strategy should be to kill Sewell before he empowers. He's always the 4th empowered target. So start off with Bloodlust, DPS him initially, and while you're able to, make sure Sewell is within melee range of whatever your current empowered target is. So at the start, we pull him with Frost King, and then when High Priestess empowers, we interrupt her and pull her over to the melee group so that cleave damage and all that stuff can hit Sewell at the same time. This will make things a lot easier, and you can kill him before he empowers. So that pretty much covers the quick guide for Heroic Council. Again, the basic idea is to tank everything except Kazra'jin within melee range while it's empowered, so that your cleave damage can hit multiple targets. Make sure you have someone kill Sewell before Kazra'jin's empower is done, so don't be afraid to leave 1 or 2 DPS on Sewell while your raid is dealing with the other empowered target if necessary. Use your raid cooldowns for Kazra'jin's empowerment. Make sure you get Frostbite handled properly, either using the 3-group method or just healing through it with the player away from everyone and using immunities if possible. And the rest is pretty simple. So, good luck, and thanks for watching.